Chapter 2, Crossing into Sinnoh. The world blinked back into focus, colors sharper and sounds louder than anything Cage had ever felt. For one impossible second, he thought he'd landed inside a dream. The air had a weight to it, heavy with the scent of pine and moss, tinged with something wild and electric. They stood at the edge of a forest, the trees older and taller than any Cage had seen back home in Hokkaido. Sunlight filtered down in speckled beams, painting shifting patterns on the ground. The wind carried the distant cries of Pokemon afar off starly, the chitter of something hidden in the undergrowth, a sound like laughter and warning all at once. Maesut stood beside them, as still as a statue. "You're here," he said, voice quieter now. "Sinnoh. This is Route 201, just beyond Twin Leaf Town. From here, the world changes." Yora glanced back, as if expecting to see the snowy fields of home. There was nothing but forest and sky, and a dirt path winding into the distance. He took a breath, steadying himself. "It's beautiful," he said finally, and Cage heard the catch in his voice. Cage wasn't sure what to say. He felt small, but not in a bad way, a single note in a song much bigger than himself. He looked at his father, searching for some sign that this was all a mistake, but Yora just nodded and started down the path. They walked in silence, the only sounds their footsteps and the whisper of the wind. Cage tried to take everything in at once, the rustle of leaves overhead, the flash of movement as something darted through the grass, the feeling that the world was watching them with ancient eyes. Maesut led the way, moving with a quiet confidence that made him seem almost otherworldly. He glanced back now and then, as if making sure they hadn't been left behind by more than just distance. Soon, the trees thinned, and the path opened up onto a hill overlooking Twin Leaf Town. Cage stopped, breath catching in his throat. He'd seen towns before, but nothing like this. The houses were small, painted in bright colors, their roofs curved like smiles. Gardens spilled over with flowers, and children ran after each other, laughter echoing across the fields. A lake shimmered in the distance, its surface broken by the leap of a magi carp. He saw a flock of starly take off from the trees, wheeling in the sky above the rooftops. It looked peaceful, safe. Ordinary, in a way that made Cage's chest ache with something he couldn't quite name. Maesut gestured toward the town. "We'll need supplies before we begin," he said. "Pokeballs. Food. Maps. The journey ahead won't be easy." Yora nodded, slipping back into the role of the parent with surprising ease. "Stay close, Cage. We're strangers here. Let's not make a scene." Cage followed, hugging his sketchbook to his chest. They passed through the outskirts of the town, heads turning as they went. People here didn't see many outsiders, and certainly not ones like them: a tall man in a patched coat, a boy with city shoes caked in mud, and a stranger dressed in black with eyes that saw too much. They reached the Poke Mart, a small building painted blue and white. Inside, the air was cool and bright. A young clerk behind the counter looked up, blinking at their arrival. "Welcome," she said, her voice nervous but polite. Are you travelers?" Maesut smiled, his presence smoothing the awkwardness. "Just passing through. We'll need a travel kit. And Pokeballs, if you have them." The clerk nodded, gathering supplies: food, water, a simple map, a packet of Pokeballs gleaming like polished gems. Cage stared at them, realizing for the first time how real this was. They were here, in Sinnoh, about to start something big. As they stepped outside, Cage fumbled with the map, tracing the path Maesut had marked for them. "Where do we go first?" he asked, voice small. Maesut's expression was unreadable. "To Sandgem Town. There's someone there who can help you. Professor Rowan. He studies Pokemon, their origins, and their bonds with people. If anyone knows how to fight what Timo and I is building, it's him." They set off down the road, leaving Twin Leaf behind. The day grew warmer, the sun climbing in the sky. Wild Pokemon darted through the grass, Shinx, Bidoof, the occasional Buda peeking from behind a rock. Cage watched them with a mixture of awe and longing. He'd never had a Pokemon of his own, not really. He wondered what it would feel like to have one by his side. As they walked, Yoru told stories, half-remembered tales from his own childhood, adventures from days before Cage was born. Cage listened, letting the words fill the silence. Suddenly, a rustle in the bushes made them stop. Cage froze, heart pounding. A small Pokemon, brown fur, nervous eyes peeked out. It was a Bidoof, watching them with curiosity. Cage knelt, holding out a hand. The Bidoof sniffed, then scampered away, vanishing into the grass. Cage laughed, the sound surprising even himself. Yoru smiled. "You'll have your own soon," he said. "Just wait." They followed the road, passing fields and forests, the landscape shifting around them. Every so often, Maysut would stop, listening to something only he could hear. Once, he led them off the path, through a grove of ancient trees. At the center, they found a shrine, old stones covered in moss, offerings of berries and flowers laid at its base. Maysut knelt, touching the stones with reverence. "The spirits here are old," he murmured. "Older than Sinnoh, older than the regions. Teemo and I wants to twist that power, make it their own. We can't let them." Cage felt a shiver run down his spine. He glanced at his father, wondering if he felt it too. They camped that night by a creek, the sky ablaze with stars. Yoru built a small fire, and they sat together, sharing bread and stories. Maysut watched the flames, silent and thoughtful. Cage's mind spun with questions. "Maysut-san," he asked, "how did you know to find us?" Maysut glanced at him, eyes glittering in the firelight. "There are people in this world who carry both shadow and light. Some call it fate. Some call it destiny. I call it balance. You and your father are important, Cage. The world needs you, even if you don't know why yet." Cage stared into the fire, trying to make sense of it all. He thought of his dream, the red eyes, the voice calling his name. He wondered if this was what he'd been waiting for, all those nights spent drawing pokeballs on the window. Yoru put a hand on his shoulder. "We'll figure it out together," he said softly. Cage nodded, letting the warmth of the fire and his father's presence settle the fear in his chest. That night, Cage dreamed again. He saw the same shadow, but now there were voices, whispers in a language he almost understood. He saw a tower of stone, a storm gathering overhead, and a figure in a mask, laughter echoing in the void. When he woke, Maysut was gone. Yoru knelt by the fire, poking at the embers. "He left a note," he said, handing it to Cage. "Cage. Yoru. The path ahead is yours to walk, trust each other. Seek Rowan. Beware the shadows. I will find you when you need me most. Maysut." Cage folded the note, tucking it into his pocket. He looked at his dad, and for the first time, he didn't feel quite so lost. They packed up their camp, shouldered their bags, and set off down the road. The world was big, and strange, and beautiful. Cage wasn't sure what waited for them in Sand Gem Town, or what Teemo and I was planning, or how he could possibly matter in a world like this. But for the first time, he wanted to find out. Together, they walked into the new day, the shadow of adventure stretching out before them.